All right, everybody, welcome back to Horn Takes. We're going to do another edition of the Bullpen because it's Friday Eve, and we've still got a little bit of weekend baseball left. The Super Regionals are set. Texas goes on the road, dominates the Coral Gables Regional. We said on the show last week we thought this was the best regional and super regional pairing that Texas could have asked for. We said on the show last week, got a feeling Texas is going to find a way to advance out of that region. And man, they really did. They go 3-0, and they really, despite the fact that games 1 and 2 were relatively close and low scoring, Texas really dominated that region. It all really started out front with the pitching. Lucas Gordon started game 1, 5 hits, 8 Ks, no walks, and only 1 run through 7 innings of work in that game 1. LBJ, what an amazing performance by LBJ. 7 hits, 8 Ks, 3 walks, and 1 run in a complete game for Texas. We talked about going in, Texas bullpen is a problem. We've been talking about Texas bullpen being a problem all season. And the way you avoid having to bring arms out of the bullpen is you just don't go to the bullpen. LBJ had 129 pitches in that game against Miami. Really, really awesome performance. Man, I've been a huge advocate for LBJ all season. We've said he's got all the stuff. He just needs to find it mentally. Boy, did he find it mentally, and he found it at the right time. Tanner Witt starts game 3 against Miami and really, really struggles. 41 pitches through 2 innings. Gave up 1 hit, which was a bomb. He had 1 walk, 1 strikeout, and 2 hit batters. And that's what really got Texas in trouble early. To start the second inning, Tanner Witt plunks the first 2 batters. And then number 3 comes up, smashes it over the wall. So that was a big blow to Texas right off the bat. 3-0 with a quickness. You know, Miami had they got a pretty powerful team, pretty good hitting squad. And they held them in check in game 1, which was really game 2. But they came out and jumped right on Texas real quick. Then Zane Morehouse, one of the guys that come out of the bullpen, he actually came out of the bullpen in 2 games. Game 1, 2 hits, 2 Ks, no walks, and 1 run in 2 innings. Game 2, which was really game 3, he had 1 hit, 7 Ks, 1 walk, and no runs through 2 2/3. Charlie Hurley, he struggled some at this time. He struggled with command. Both those guys, Zane Morehouse and Charlie Hurley, they've both been really good, and they've both also been pretty rough. You know, they've both given up free passes and then given up big hits. Charlie Hurley takes the ball in game 3, down 3-0. Tanner Witt did not obviously look good. He only lasted 2 innings. And Charlie Hurley goes 4 1/3, giving up 4 hits, striking 2 out. He did give up 1 walk. And then he also gave up his own 3-run home run. But at that point, the game was well in hand. So Texas only used 5 arms the entire weekend to go 3-0 at the Coral Gables Regional. You couldn't ask. David Pierce could not have asked for a better performance out of his pitching staff than he got last weekend. And I think what every Texas fan expected was that we might get a pretty deep outing at a Gordon, because he's done that before as well. He's gone really deep in games before. And I think we expected LBJ to be LBJ, which for most of this year has been, probably 6-7 innings of really good baseball, really good pitching. He just kept going and kept going and kept going, man. Just a really, really great effort by him. And I hope for him that is a confidence booster, because this dude, if you haven't seen LBJ pitch, tune into the Super Regional this weekend rather. Check him out, man. He's got some legit major league stuff. And the only times he's gotten himself in trouble is when he thinks too much, I think. He doesn't trust what he's got in his arm. So congrats on that pitching staff. The defense was phenomenal as well. Game 1 against Louisiana, the bats still hadn't come alive yet. There's 2 guys on base, two outs. I don't remember which inning this was. It was sometime early to mid game. And the kid from Louisiana smokes one to center field. And this thing, you've all watched an outfielder run to the fence and look up. And you can just tell by their body language and tell by the way they're looking up at the ball and how quickly they get to the fence. Like, that ball's gone, right? And that's what I was thinking. Thinking that ball's gone. Well, Kennedy never gave up on it. Jumps up, puts his glove over the wall. It was a home run for sure. And he snatched it and brought it back in. And that was a huge, huge moment in that game. 4-2 victory. With that, if everything goes the same, it's a 5-4 loss. And then later on in the game, Dylan Campbell, playing his usual right field, big shot towards the right field line that's tailing away from him. Left-handed batter. This thing's moving away from him, and he just runs it down and makes an amazing diving play. Big moment in the game. That was sort of late in the game. So the defense was great. Lucas Gordon owes those guys dinner, right? At some point. And the rest of the defense was good too. There was one error I can remember. I believe it was in game 2, game 1 against Miami. Someone hit one real hard shot right at O'Dowd, and he just lifted his glove up too soon. The ball went right between his legs. Something you generally don't see. They were able to get out of it. No harm, no foul. But overall, the defense was really good all weekend. The offense was good when it needed to be good. When some big moments came up, the offense came through. Dylan Campbell with a big double in game 1, score 2 runs. Big home run, big 2-run blast right at the beginning of game 2 against Miami. Make it 2-0 right off the bat. Mitchell Daly gets a home run to extend the lead in game 1. Jack O'Dowd hit a home run in that game to extend the lead. And then Jalen Flores with just a huge grand slam. It was crazy. The bases are juiced. Jalen Flores comes up, and me and my wife are downstairs in the basement. We've got multiple TVs. So we were watching all the games. And I kind of looked over at my wife, and I said, this would be like a perfect time for Jalen Flores to get a hold of one, because Jalen Flores is a guy with a lot of pop. He's a big kid, 6'3", 195 pounds, true freshman. He's got really good power. He's still just learning how to be a hitter. He's been in this DH role a couple of times this year, but not for any extended period of time. Tanner Carlson came on really strong towards the end of the year, and that was kind of the end of it for Jalen Flores until he got put into to play shortstop for Daly for a while, which, by the way, Daly played all 3 games, started all 3 games in the regional. I imagine that's a couple of reasons. David Pierce said, I want to get my more experienced defensive guy in there, and I'm going to have Jalen Flores in the lineup anyway because Tanner Carlson's hurt. But anyhow, I looked over at my wife and said, man, this would be an awesome time for him to get a hold of one. And man, did he popped one over the center field wall. Huge momentum swing in that game. Huge. It was like they scored 9 runs in the 3rd inning of that game. Just absolutely. At that point, Miami, no matter what the players will say, what the coach will say, they knew the game was over. Even that early in the game, they knew the game was over. All the momentum was with Texas. They just dropped 9 on them. That's tough to come back from mentally. And you could see Miami deteriorate from there. From that point on, they started arguing about calls. They started worried about what was happening. You could just tell they weren't confident anymore. They could feel the pressure. And that's how you win. And that's how Texas has won a lot of games this year. They've jumped on a lot of teams this year and just put the game away from a mental perspective really quickly. Couple guys, we'll talk about it a little later, but Peyton Powell and Eric Kennedy both struggled in this regional, and really both those guys have been struggling for a while. They've been struggling going back probably before the West Virginia series. Certainly in the Big 12 tournament. And I don't remember exactly what those guys did in the West Virginia series, but I don't think they had a huge role like they have had in a lot of games this year offensively. State of the program, 41-20. Have an opportunity to hit that sort of illustrious 45 wins. If they do that, they're deep in the College World Series. At this point, rankings don't matter. I don't even think they're ranked. I don't even know if the coaches bother ranking anybody anymore. The Associated Press ranks at this point. Doesn't matter. There's 16 teams left, right? The pitching is the pitching, right? The starters are going to be pretty good. We don't know exactly what we're going to get out of Tanner Witt. Some outings he's been really good. Some outings he's really struggled. And by the way, he hadn't pitched in a couple of weekends at this point. And I'm sure he threw bullpens, but there's nothing like live action, right? Nothing like a live batter sitting there, a batter you're not used to in a game like that. It's just different. So I think him struggling is not a sign that he's going to continue to struggle. I think it was just a moment thing and he's still knocking rust off of everything. The bullpen still absolutely scares the shit out of me. Although they did really well in there. Man, if Charlie Hurley and Zane Morehouse can perform the way they did in that regional for the rest of however long Texas is in this tournament, I think Texas has a really good shot to continue to advance. Offensively, man, we've talked about it a million times. This lineup from 1 to 6 really has a lot of ability to hurt you. Jalen Flores has a lot of ability to hurt you in a big moment like he did against Miami. His batting average isn't great. I think he's barely batting over 200. But it doesn't matter. If you can get runs in 2, 3, 4 at a time, he may have had one other hit, a couple of other hits in this whole regional. Doesn't matter. He hit a grand slam. Jack O'Dowd can hurt you. Another guy that, average-wise isn't super high. I think he's up near 300, but he's not at 300. He may be now. I don't know. I haven't looked at it. He's been hanging out around, anywhere between 250 and, let's say, 280 for most of the season. but he can hurt you. And he's hit 3 home runs since the Big 12 tournament. So when these guys get locked in and they're really seeing the ball well and they're being patient, like when the moment's not too big for them, they're rough, man. I wouldn't want to have to pitch against them. And I wouldn't want to have to find 2 guys that can go out and completely neutralize them for 6 or 7 innings and then hope the bullpen can hang on to whatever type of lead you got or keep you in it long enough for you to get the lead, because they're dangerous. Dylan Campbell, man, 38-game hitting streak, Big 12 record, Texas record, only 20 games off from Robin Ventura's NCAA record. I don't think Dylan Campbell's coming back, but let's say he did. He's got a shot if he can keep it going, right? Talked about Powell and Kennedy just really struggling a lot, but in particular, they struggled hard at this Coral Gables Regional. 2 for 23 with 9 strikeouts combined in 3 games at the Coral Gables Regional. Hopefully they get a reset, because, man, if those two guys carried Texas for a really long time earlier this year offensively, if they can get back to that with all these other guys finally have coming along and they're being pretty consistent, you're going to have to score some runs against Texas to beat Texas. But can those guys get back on track? I think that's a big question for this team right now. It's a big question for this super regional this weekend. Obviously a big question if they happen to advance this weekend. I think Texas went into Coral Gables with an attitude, and they played like it. Can they maintain that? Can they stay hungry? Nobody wants to, regardless of how the season is gone, nobody wants to see Texas in their regional, and they don't want to see Texas in a super regional. Now, lately, you get them at the College World Series, you might be all right with playing Texas, but you do not want to play them in a regional, and you do not want to play them in a super regional. It's not going to be easy, and it doesn't matter what their season look like. They have enough talent on that roster every single year that they can move through those two pieces of the tournament and just really mess things up for you. Now, I don't think we talked a little bit last week about Miami. They're a 9 seed headed into the tournament. Just missed being a national seed. Miami has a track record of being highly touted going into this tournament. Now, and they also have a track record of winning some. So don't get it twisted, Miami fans. Credit where credit's due. You guys have won it. You guys have played deep in it. But they have a track record, especially here lately, of just disappointing. Being done before they should be done. But they actually had a really good regional. They just ran into a team that's better right now. Palo Alto Super Regional. This one kicks. I always want to say kicks off. First pitch in this one is going to be 5 p.m. And all these times I'm going to be rattling off the rest of the show. They're all Central Time. So Saturday, June 10th at 5 p.m. will be first pitch in game 1. And then they'll play June 11th to be determined Sunday. And then Monday, June 12th if necessary. All of us Texas fans are hoping it's not necessary because Lucas Gordon and LBJ went in and shut down that Stanford offense, which, by the way, is really good. Stanford has a really good hitting team. Their pitching is not what we're used to seeing out of Stanford historically, generally. Usually Stanford's kind of like a Augie Garrido Texas team. Really, really good pitching. Just enough offense to bail that really, really good pitching out. A lot of 3-2, 4-2, 4-1 type games. That's usually what Stanford is. They're a little bit different team this year. They hit the ball really well. One thing about Stanford, and this is really, I didn't realize this, but to me, it's interesting to me. I didn't realize this till I started looking at this matchup. Their resume to me is just not impressive. I'm really surprised that Stanford is a number 8 seed in this tournament. They only played 4 series all season long against ranked teams. They split with Texas Tech. They lost the series to Oregon. They swept the highest ranked team they've beat this year at the time of playing them was an Arizona State team that was ranked 20th, which they swept, which somehow didn't manage to make the NCAA tournament at all. I had to go back and look at that like multiple times. I'm like, surely, because that was a pretty late series in their schedule when Arizona State was 20th. So they must have just fell off a cliff and absolutely bombed out of the Pac-12 tournament to not even make the tournament. And then obviously they won these 2 out of 3 against A&M at the Palo Alto Regional. A&M is a team that has ability and they can get hot. They've done it before, right? But they were just way too much offensively for Texas A&M. I think keys to this super regional for Texas are pretty simple. Hope for some deep outings out of that pitching staff. If you're Texas, you do not want to see Tanner Witt on the mound. Nothing against Tanner Witt, but you want to win 2 games and be done with it. You want to take your 2 guys that have been really, really good all season, go out to Palo Alto, shut down a good offensive team, do just enough offensively to win those games, and get your shit ready to go to Omaha. That's perfect scenario from a pitching perspective. Offensively, got to get Peyton Powell back on track, got to get Eric Kennedy back on track, and got to continue to see that production from the rest of that top 6 and even those guys from 7 on down that have found ways to contribute in not like in quantity, but certainly quality. So who's going to be the 8 at the plate? We're down to 16 teams. Who are going to be the 8 teams that make it to Omaha? Let's talk about it. So you got the Charlottesville Super Regional. You got Virginia hosting with an RPI of 10, Duke with an RPI of 20. Their first pitch is Friday, tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. Central Time. I went back and started looking at some stats on these teams because I haven't got to see a lot of these teams play. So generally when I don't get to see a team play, I'll go back, look at their schedule a little bit, see what's on the schedule, who they've beaten, who they struggled with. And then I'll just start kind of looking at some stats. And what I did was I kind of took 2 pitching stats and then 2 offensive stats. And I just went and kind of filled out a little spreadsheet and made myself some notes. But if you look at these 2 teams in ERA and WHIP for the pitching side and slugging percentage and batting average on the offensive side, Virginia is better than Duke in all 4 of those categories. And batting average is not even close. Virginia's at home. I think the Cavaliers are going to the College World Series. I think they'll do it. I think they'll do it in 2 games. Fort Worth Super Regional, which really should be a Terre Haute Super Regional, but because of Terre Haute and the Special Olympics and vendor, it's just not being a big place, right? They don't have the infrastructure to handle that many people for a super regional. So they handed up. They said we can't host this. This other thing is important to us. Figure out where we're going to play. Well, they gave it to TCU, which I guess makes sense. TCU is 25 RPI. Indiana State, 9 RPI. Their first pitch is Friday at 4 p.m. You look at those 4 stats that we're talking about, and Indiana State is better in every last one. Which that one kind of surprised me. They have a really good team ERA. A pretty impressive whip. Slugging over 530 as a team. 324 batting average as a team. TCU's at home, though, and TCU is probably one of the hottest teams in baseball, right? What they did to Arkansas in Fayetteville, and what they did to Arkansas this season, they played 3 games against Arkansas, 2 of those in the Fayetteville Regional, one of them at the College Baseball Classic or whatever they call it there in Arlington that generally pits 2 SEC teams against 2 Big 12 teams. In those 3 games, TCU scored 49 runs against Arkansas. That is absolutely nuts to me. A good Arkansas team. And I didn't get to see. I only saw the beginning of the absolute massacre that they had in game 1 against Arkansas. And then I watched quite a bit of their game 2 against Arkansas. I didn't see the first one at all, but they won that one like 17 to 8 or something like that. So they got to be, that's got to be a confident bunch. But I think Indiana State's going to go into Fort Worth. I think the magic's over for TCU. I think Indiana State's going to walk in there. They got a better team. They got a better RPI. I think they're just a better team. I think they're going to walk in there, and I think it's going to take 3 games, but I think they're going to beat TCU in Fort Worth. So we got Indiana State moving on. Eugene Super Regional. Oregon, 28th in RPI. Oral Roberts, who's kind of a interesting story. It's not kind of an interesting story. Who the hell thought Oral Roberts was going to be in the Super Regionals in 2023? I don't even think if you asked Oral Roberts players and coaches, they thought they would be in the Super Regional. They probably made a goal of just make the tournament. Their RPI is not that good. So they're a team that has really good numbers. And if you look at their numbers compared to Oregon, they're better in all 4 of those categories. But it seems like they've probably done it against not as good a competition as Oregon. And again, the Pac-12 does not impress me at all. That doesn't mean Oregon won't beat Oral Roberts, and that doesn't mean Stanford, who's left from the Pac-12, won't beat Texas. That's not what I'm trying to say. I'm just saying you look at those teams and who they've played this year, it's just not – you play who you play, right? And they've done what they've needed to do to win those games, and they've done what they've needed to do to advance to the spot they're in this tournament. But what they've done to this point, or really before the tournament, is not impressive. Doesn't mean they're not good teams. Doesn't mean they can't be great teams. One of those teams could go and win the College World Series. But their resumes to this point don't impress me. But Oral Roberts has got a problem. They're 62 in RPI. And that is by far the worst out of all of these 16 teams that are left. So their first pitch, Friday, 7 p.m. I think despite the RPI, I'm going to go with Oral Roberts. But there's got to be there has to be just oh my God, no fucking way, right? There has to be one of those in every tournament. It's Oral Roberts, man. They're going to advance. They're going to beat Oregon. It's going to take 3 games. But I got Oral Roberts coming out of that Eugene Super Regional. Winston-Salem Super Regional. Wake Forest, number 1 in RPI. Bama, 11th in RPI. First pitch Saturday, 11 a.m. Wake Forest is a dominant pitching team. They remind me of the Vanderbilt team a couple of years ago. They had Kumar and Leiter. Almost impossible all year to get anything off these guys. That's the type of pitching staff Wake Forest has. And they bat as a team .308. Their slugging percentage as a team is .545. Alabama's going home quickly. 2 games. Alabama's back at home. Wake Forest is buying tickets to go to Omaha. Baton Rouge Super Regional, you got LSU at 4 RPI. Kentucky at 2. Kentucky's been high RPI all season. Which I think is just kind of a, I talk about in the SEC in football that these teams just they just beat each other and they move like in these huge swings. So one week they're at like 17, and then they'll beat the team that's ranked 5th, and they'll move up to like 8th, and then someone beats them, and because they beat them, now they're moved up into the top 10. It's just like this. It's a weird cycle that you see with the SEC, and I'm not trying to say those teams that the SEC is not good, but it's interesting to watch how those highly ranked teams get treated, and how teams that just happen to beat a highly ranked team get treated in the polls. And I think what you're seeing, and I know RPI is all statistical. I say I know. I'm pretty sure it's all just formulas, right? So that's kind of interesting to me. Their first pitch is Saturday at 2 p.m., weather permitting. Baton Rouge Regional was a rough one to get in. But if you look at all 4 of those categories, the only one that Kentucky has an advantage in is ERA, and it's okay, 4.17. LSU's slugging over 100 points better than Kentucky. The whip is almost identical. And they're about 20 points higher batting average. They're playing at home. One thing I will give these SEC baseball schools, I don't know if it's always been like this, but those fans are wild. They get into it, and like they are there. They are in the moment. They're in the game. LSU Baton Rouge can't be a good place to play, an easy place to play for opposing teams. And the fact that this is an SEC matchup, I think it's going to be rowdy in Baton Rouge, and I think LSU is going to pull it out. I think that they're just – it's just going to be hard to beat LSU. And I know we talked earlier in the year about LSU or the field when LSU was – LSU at that point had been the number 1 team for weeks and weeks and weeks on end. They're not invincible, but they are really good. I think the key for any team that wants to beat LSU is to get the Skeens. Skeens? Is it Skeens or Skeen? It doesn't matter. Get to their ace like South Carolina did back in the regular season. Get his ass out of the game, and then I think you have a chance. If you let that guy sit up on the hill and just control the game, you're losing that game. You got to hunt fastball and be on time with him. Get his ass out of the game if you want to beat LSU. So I'm picking LSU to come out of the Baton Rouge Regional. Next, we got the Hattiesburg Super Regional. I said regional. The Baton Rouge Super Regional. Next, we got the Hattiesburg Super Regional. You got Tennessee, who's 12 RPI. Southern Miss, who's 17 RPI. First pitch Saturday, 2 p.m. Tennessee's got the edge in every statistical category. They're slugging 70 points higher. Tennessee has a really good whip. Really good team ERA. I like Tennessee in this one. A lot of people were upset that Tennessee didn't get to host this one. So this was one of those deals where the two regionals were meeting up and none of the nationally seeded guys were left. So I still don't know what kind of process they go through to determine what happens at that point. But Hattiesburg got it. A lot of Tennessee fans. I think a lot of college baseball fans were like, really? I think that may be Southern Miss's only saving grace that they're playing at home. But I think Tennessee's a really good team. They're a really capable team. It hasn't been a great year for them, but it's been a good enough year. They're in the Super Regionals again. Gainesville Super Regional, Florida RPI of 3, South Carolina RPI of 6. I think this is going to be a really good one. South Carolina swept Florida in Columbia late in the season. These guys' first pitch is Saturday at 5 p.m. Central. This one and the Palo Alto Super Regional are interesting to me because these are the only two Super Regionals where one team has a clear advantage in pitching and the other team has a slight advantage offensively. We know from experience that good pitching beats good offense. But offense is one of those things where it only takes one, right? It only takes one big shot with the bases loaded to really change the outcome of a game. So for the teams that have the advantage in pitching, can they be consistently good? Can they consistently keep those offenses at bay and limit those? Because I don't think Florida is just going to offensively do a whole lot to South Carolina. But can South Carolina's pitching keep Florida from hitting them with too many of those big ones, those one and done big shots that change the game? I like South Carolina. Good pitching will almost always beat good offense. The caveat to that is keeping them in the park. I think if South Carolina can keep Florida in the yard, South Carolina is going to win this Super Regional. Now to Palo Alto, the final Super Regional. Stanford is a 16 RPI. Texas is 22 in the RPI right now. First pitch Saturday, 5 p.m. Central. Same story. Texas holds a decided edge in the pitching categories. Stanford has a slight edge in both slugging percentage and batting average. Texas's one bugaboo pitching has been walks, free passes, whether it's walks, whether it's hit batsmen, whether it's once runners are on, throwing a wild pitch. They've given up too many easy free bases, and in a lot of those instances, they've given up the big hit, which wouldn't have been a big hit. It would have just been a hit if they wouldn't have gave the free passes, right? So can Texas keep Stanford in the yard and make Stanford earn it against good pitching? I think they do. I think Texas again is going to find a way to advance against a top-seeded team in this tournament. Their pitching is much better than Stanford's. They've got experience going on the road and winning in the super regional. Don't ask me how many games it takes. If I had to guess, I'd say it's a 2-game deal, just because I think if Texas gets to 3, has to play a third, they're going to be in trouble. But I'm taking Texas. I'm taking Texas to go to their, third College World Series in the last 3 years. That's what I'm doing. So, we got Texas, South Carolina. Here's our picks. We'll just run down these picks one last time. Our 8 at the plate for the College World Series is Virginia, Indiana State, Oral Roberts, Wake Forest, LSU, Tennessee, South Carolina, and Texas. If I'm wrong, you guys can bust me up about it. Join us next week on the Bullpen. We'll talk about these super regionals, see if our picks were right. Hopefully, we're talking about Texas making another trip out to Omaha. We haven't done the cheap seats in a long time. I got to get through baseball, and then we're going to have 2 solid months where we can talk about football before football's actually here. Once it's done, we'll have Chris from the Spurs Up Show. We'll talk some ESPN, SEC football, basketball, baseball, what Texas and OU coming into that league is going to look like. Subscribe to the podcast anywhere you listen to podcasts, or check out the link at horntakespodcast.buzzsprout.com. All the podcasts are there. Subscribe to the YouTube channel. Find me on TikTok, Twitter, Facebook at horntakes. Email me at horntakespodcast@gmail.com. with all your comments, questions, concerns, and criticisms. I love them all. You guys have a good weekend. Enjoy that baseball. Hook 'em.